Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello everyone, and thank you so much again for joining us for Friday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy. Up first tonight, this is Barrow up there in the Arctic coast, and coastal flooding going on today due to pretty gusty northwest and northwest winds. And this residence right there definitely has water around it, while this one here, the light one with the dark trim, there's water all the way around it there. And then you can kind of make out the choppy nature of the sea, the Arctic Ocean in the background. And there is a coastal flood warning out here, central western Arctic coast, until early this evening. Not due to the 25 to 35 mile an hour winds, gust 45. In fact, Barrow had a peak gust today of up to 46 miles per hour. And then the eastern coastline here, Beaufort Sea coast, there's a advisory, high surf advisory out. Not expecting the kind of flooding they had, say, in around the Barrow area, but could see some beach erosion there due to the high surf. So moving on to satellite imagery, you can see a pinwheel cloud feature right here. That's a upper level low drifting in toward the Queen Charlotte Islands. Otherwise, a lot of clouds here along the border and east into British Columbia, but also some clearing going on back over the northern panhandle and North Gulf Coast into the southeast interior. And in this area of clouds here, pretty good boundary between damper, milder conditions to the east, and then definitely cooler, drier conditions to the west. As you can see, a lot of sunshine breaking out today from the roughly about the Koyukuk Valley all the way down into Bristol Bay, and then pretty good storm up off the Arctic coast there. You can spinning right up and through here, bringing snow and the winds to the Arctic coast and the north slope here, with snowfall levels falling down towards sea level today, even up over the northwest here in toward Kotzebue Sound, with precipitation falling in the form of snow. Otherwise, the Bering Sea, just areas of low clouds, dry conditions here down to the Alaska Peninsula, and the next system pushing into the western Aleutians. Most of that energy with that going up to the north is strong high pressure here that's developed over the Bering Sea. Even though it's moving eastward here, it's going to really slow it down with initially, we'll be continuing to move that off to the north and northeast, but the northern portion here is going to eventually slip on in and affect the, especially the northwest part of the state, and then probably across the entire state on Sunday, north of the mountains. Otherwise, on today's analysis, that 1,034 millibar high centered just south of the central Aleutians there, but strongly ridging northward and then a little bit inland here, so that flow becoming a little more offshore. So we're seeing the clearing skies here in the west with the upper level trough, or the advancing trough here, slowly moving eastward, brought some rain and snow into the Fairbanks area today, back to the northeast. And then that extends down with showers from the Alaska Range across the Matanuska-Susitna Valley, Kenai Peninsula, all the way down to this weak dissipating low near Kodiak, keeping the showers going there, and even over the North Gulf Coast. And again, just some isolated showers now, really drying out over the Panhandle. And then the wind and snow, you can see the gradient strongest up there. We had the strongest wind reports from Barrow at, again, to 46 miles an hour, diminishing, a lot less wind there, but some light snow working into the at least in toward the Kobuk Valley on back toward Kotzebue. And for the forecast tonight, that boundary stationary front, pretty much stationary right through here, kind of mostly sliding eastward. Could see some areas of light snow along this, and then more specifically up along the Brooks Range, and a little bit of a break, and then more snow with slowly diminishing winds here for this Arctic coast tonight. Again, that flood advisory lasts into the evening, and the coastal flood warning ends by early evening Friday. South of the front, just really a westerly flow, kind of mild, coming up from the southwest, bringing in some moisture and lower flying conditions to the southern coast of the Seward Peninsula. Southward towards St. Lawrence Island. Next front out there again is going to be mostly directed northward. Another wave, that low feature rolling to the north, which Saturday, tomorrow, will come north and then actually edge a little bit farther to the east, and one warm surge coming in, so snow changing to rain, temperatures going up and staying quite windy up here over the northwest part of the state, and then back out into the central Bering Sea. Mostly sunny here, south central Alaska. Showers chances continue, a couple of more upper level troughs, but that whole mess will be moving out, and it looks like on Sunday, sunshine across the entire area. Strong high pressure just north of Skagway there, and that'll be keeping it dry and mostly sunny across southern Alaska. Next storm coming northward here, wind and rain sweeping back into Kodiak Island and Alaska Peninsula. Wind, rain working into Bristol Bay. And then this front out here staying mostly to the north, kind of improving up here, staying cloudy and kind of damp. And again, the snowfall levels back up, so anything at sea level will be in the form of rain, and a band of rain down this front to the central Aleutians. For lows tonight, forecast to be in the mid to upper 20s here from the Copper River Basin across the eastern Tanana Valley into the mid-teens there along the Brooks Range, and a little further to the west here, seeing the Nenana, maybe probably the Denali area clearing out, so temperatures could fall a little below 20 degrees with upper 20s in the Kuskokwim Valley, and then on the way back up to upper 30s along the coast to lower 40s for St. Lawrence Island, and again Arctic coast anywhere from upper 20s in the east to the mid to upper 30s here on the western coast. And temperatures will be a little cooler over south central Alaska tonight than last night, of course. Could be some areas of frost around Anchorage, 40s for the Panhandle. Highs tomorrow shaping up like this, back into the mid 30s here for the Arctic coast. Brooks Range, upper 20s, lower 30s, lower 40s on the western coast. Again, warmer air now spreading up to the northeast. 40s here, lower to mid from Selawik Valley southward. Lower 50s, Bristol Bay. Coming up, 55, 56, 7, maybe 58 for Kodiak, 50s for the Susitna Valley. And the Panhandle, not too bad with, let's see, highs tomorrow in the mid to upper 50s, say for the Prince of Wales Island area, and a little bit cooler on up to the north. And for the low temperatures forecast now for Sunday morning, definitely probably many areas south central Alaska could drop into the upper 20s, otherwise lower 30s to mid 30s in the milder locations, and 20 or teens and 20s, I'll call it, for the Copper River Basin. But with more cloud cover, moisture, and milder air coming in, Tanana Valley actually will be warmer with lower to mid 30s, near 40 out here now for the northwest coast. That's Point Hope with 40, and Shishmaref with even Kotzebue forecast just 39. Warmer also for the Brooks Range and the Arctic coast on those low temperatures. And out west here, mostly in the lower to mid 40s to near 40 right around St. Paul and even St. Lawrence Island.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving into flying weather, quite a swath of IFR here extending from the Adak-Atka area northward across St. Matthew Island, St. Lawrence Island, and then the Seward Peninsula on into the northwest here with the really banking up on the south side of the western Brooks Range and then kind of sliding eastward throughout the day. VFR to the south. North Slope has a reasonable area of VFR up there as well with marginal along the coast. And the Panhandle starting out, some IFR here along the eastern border. Otherwise, not too bad in the early morning hours. And southeast interior, it looks like around the Wrangell Mountains, some of that moisture still in the area there that'll be moving out by afternoon, gone. VFR all the way across here to the western Alaska Range southward. Now we've got marginal VFR moving into the central Tanana Valley here with some IFR actually forecast around the White Mountains. IFR along and south of the Brooks Range and from the Seward Peninsula on down into the northern Bering Sea, western Arctic coast. Good VFR, Kodiak Island, Bristol Bay, marginal picking up around Nikolsky there, but on Alaska Island, mostly in the VFR flying areas, and then still diminishing IFR for the central Aleutians, and then the next surge coming in out west, which will slowly move eastward for Sunday morning here, but staying west of Adak and Atka, where they're almost into the VFR flying. Quite an area again of IFR here from the central interior, Koyukuk Valley, really back to the west, and lee side notch there of VFR just north of the Brooks Range, and then back into the IFR out along the coast. Another should be VFR here, south central Alaska, that actually improves on Sunday and holds through Sunday here on down the southeast coast. Less, a little bit better, a little improvement up here over the north and northwest, but still along the south slopes of the Brooks Range, an area of IFR, more VFR in the north slope, margin along the coast, and now some IFR showing up on the east side of Kodiak Island. Passes shaping up like this, IFR for Anatuvik and Adigan, but down south, Lake Clark, Merrill, rainy and windy, as well as Isabel, VFR, but Mentasta starting out marginal, becoming VFR hopefully by noon. And then for Tanita, VFR, Portage, VFR, and Chilcoot and White, VFR. Freezing levels, cold air that's coming down out this way today and yesterday, shifting eastward, and by tomorrow morning, 2,000 feet, all the way down to the North Gulf Coast. A little bit milder conditions back here, 6,000 feet over Bristol Bay. Icing looking like this, above about 3,000 feet, with those surges of moisture coming eastward here. Areas of light rime icing, possibly really isolated areas of anything heavier than light to moderate, but mostly above 3,000 feet. Then a kind of a breakout here, and the next, the bulk of the moisture staying out to the west. And still, with that upper trough exiting the panhandle, still have a chance of some mixed mixed icing of the light variety there over the southern southeast coast. Upper level jet stream here showing the upper trough here slowly moving off, but still enough of a trough effect back here to keep the showers going and the moisture threat over the southern panhandle. And the main jet though well to the south, high pressure over the Bering Sea. And we've got pretty good winds at 33,000 feet or 30,000 feet coming over the top, 100 knots along the Arctic coast, northeast 60 to 80, drying it out here, especially over southern Alaska. And the 9,000 foot winds showing a narrower ridge from the southwest interior here on down across the east central Aleutians to the west of that ridge. Pretty good winds here, 50 knots at 9,000 feet northward. And then southwesterlies diminishing as they approach the Seward Peninsula here down to 20, 25 knots, but picking up again along the western Brooks Range, 35 knots, and that extends to the north, much lighter over southern Alaska, and then 25 knots out of the northwest along the southeast coast, same pattern, 3,000 feet down there. Otherwise, winds are pretty light over the interior, southwest 25 to 35. Extend right into the northern Bering, and then ahead of that front as the storm lifts northward, there'll be a band of 50-knot winds extending down toward Amchitka Island. Turbulence-wise with that, occasional moderate chop here, St. Lawrence Island, across the Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula, Shishmaref, on up toward Kivalina, maybe Kotzebue or Point Hope, and then into the Brooks Range there, and pretty smooth on down to the south.
Thanks for joining us for another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider, and today I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Uccellini, the Director of the United States National Weather Service. Welcome back to Alaska, sir.
Thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
Thanks. Prior to being the leader of the National Weather Service, your work included an extensive look at snowstorms across the northeastern United States. These are the types of storms that can bring some of the country's largest cities to its knees. Tell me a little bit about your fascination with snow.
Well, as far back as I can remember, I've always been interested in weather, growing up as a kid on Long Island, New York, and was particularly fascinated by snowstorms, why they occurred. The distribution of snow was very varied across the entire region. The rain-snow line, all those things fascinated me right from the get-go. And I was interested in knowing how they worked, how the forecast worked, or more often than not didn't work one way or the other. And that drove me, that interest continued to build and drove me through high school right into college, wanting to be a meteorologist.
Okay, that's a fascinating story, and I think every meteorologist has a weather story like that in some way.
Right.
Due to Alaska's size and proximity to the North Pole, sometimes it's difficult to detect and analyze the weather patterns over Alaska. What's the National Weather Service doing to improve that weather detection?
Well, observations in this type of environment is a big challenge, whether it's from space or from what we call in situ observations from the ground or within the systems. Clearly, satellites have been playing an increasing role in providing the big picture, not only from a visual sense in what you see is occurring, but also from providing the data for numerical models that then are used to actually predict the weather. Alaska is actually pretty well positioned with respect to polar orbiting satellites, since you get a faster return of those satellites over your particular area. And in fact, the polar satellite system is the backbone for the observations that we use in our models, especially our global models, and they're particularly important for observing weather features that affect Alaska.
Alaskans live and die by the weather every day, and one of the strategic goals of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration and the National Weather Service is to develop a more weather-ready nation. What does it mean for Alaskans to be weather-ready?
Well, the strategic outcome is based on people being ready, responsive, and therefore resilient to the increasing threats to extreme weather events. Those threats are related to not only the nature of the events, but the fact that we're becoming more vulnerable to them as we have more people, more infrastructure that could be affected by these events. So we have to ensure that the observations we make for situational awareness, the forecasts we make for people to take the proper responses, are connected to people's actions, the response to these events, so that they will be more resilient to what's facing them. There are examples with respect to hurricanes. More people living along the coastline takes longer to evacuate. We have to make better forecasts with longer lead times, but we also have to communicate the threat so people will actually take action to avoid those storms. Up here you have, as in other parts of the United States, an increasing threat related to fire. As there are more people living in fire-prone areas. We have to ensure that our forecasts are good, that we don't have false alarms that make people not react to the forecast when in fact they should. But we also have to be able to communicate the threat and make sure that we're working with the partners in the emergency management community so that communities and right down to individuals will actually take the proper responses in the face of these events. So that's the strategic goal. There are a lot of challenges for us in terms of improving forecasts, but also improving our communication skills and linking with the emergency management communities that are actually out there trying to protect lives and mitigate property loss.
So a huge partnership effort going forward.
That's one of the important keys for the success of meeting the strategic goal.
Okay. One of the things you're talking about was understanding the weather information we're getting back from the computers, weather modeling, and you did a lot of work with that in some of your prior positions with the Environmental Prediction Center there, the National Center for Environmental Prediction. What can you tell us about recent improvements in that weather modeling? And you were using the polar orbiters as kind of a source of information that started that process.
Well, first of all, we have to recognize that everything you see, you read and hear about weather, climate, or ocean forecasts are all driven by numerical models. Now, it really has been the revolution in our forecast process in the last part of the 20th century. The success of that numerical enterprise is based on three factors: big computers, global data, not just local data, but you have to have a global data set, and then the models themselves, the science that's behind the models and in running the models in an operational mode. So we're working to improve all three of those components. We upgraded our computers last year. We're going through another upgrade even as I speak. will be upgrading from 200 trillion calculations per second to 700 trillion calculations per second by January of 2015. This increase in the computer will allow us to run what we call Earth system models. It's not just the atmosphere, it's the atmosphere, ocean, ice, which is obviously very important up here, and land models that are all coupled together at higher resolution. So you need the big computers, you need the science that allows us to run these models and run them in a parallel mode, and that they're coupled so that the ocean effects could affect the atmosphere and vice versa, as an example. And then the global observations are absolutely critical, and over the last 20, 30 years they've become more dependent upon the satellite systems, and especially the polar orbiting satellites, which help drive the observations needed for those models, whether they be atmospheric observations, land, ice observations. We're deriving more and more of that from satellites now that feed into these models and produce forecasts with extended lead times. Now out, for extreme events especially, we're seeing much improved forecast out in the 4, 5, 6, 7, and even 8-day range, which gets us back to Weather Ready Nation, because if you're going to get ready for a storm event, you want those consistent forecasts approaching that event from day 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, so you can take the actions several days in advance that can help mitigate the property loss and protect your livelihood.
Okay, all part of the mission of protecting life and property. Dr. Uccellini, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate it, and speaking to Alaskans and sharing how the National Weather Service is working for Alaska and the nation. Wish you safe travels around the 49th. Enjoy your time here, sir. And for Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Looking at the marine forecast, we've got west winds of 15 turn northwest for much of the coastline for tomorrow, and even lighter winds and definitely more variable here over the inside waters, just 5 to 10 knots. Seas pretty slight, 2 feet or less, becoming southeast at 10 for northern Lynn Canal. And from there, we've got northerlies at about 25 knots here for northern Lynn Canal, so pretty good increase here coming up for that zone, with 5-foot seas, 20 knots out of the northwest for Stevens Passage, Clarence Strait, just coming up to 15 knots, and north winds here up to 20 knots now on the south coast with 5 to 6 foot seas, but diminishing and then turning east at just 10 knots there up to the north, those seas coming down to 3 feet. And for Prince William Sound, northwesterlies, 15 tomorrow. Could be some higher gusts out of the northern western bays there, but nothing all that significant. And then we've got same direction here, northwest 20 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas, and then northwest to 20 for the Barren Islands, on up into Cook Inlet where they become northeasterly, pretty light, but northeast breeze with 2 to 3 foot seas. And then for Sunday, 15 to 20 knots, a little bit of an increase here for Cook Inlet, and definitely for Kachemak Bay coming up to 30 knots, with those seas building to 13 feet. Seas only building to 6 feet, though, for the Barren Islands. East 20 for the western North Gulf Coast. Southeast 15 here for the east side, and light easterly winds for Prince William Sound. Kodiak Island, tomorrow, not too bad. Northerlies, 10 to 15 knots, 3 to 4 foot seas. And Bristol Bay, though, a little brisker at 20 from the north, northeast 15 on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. South side, 15 knots from the north, all the way up to Sitkinak. And then for Sunday, big increase in the winds, 40 knots, that storm coming northward. So we got 40-knot winds right up even into Shelikof Strait, and from Sitkinak to Castle Cape, east 40, then Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev, northeast 40, with 15 to 17-foot seas. Coming up to 30 knots, Bristol Bay out of the northeast, and gales here, minimum gales on the Bering Sea side of the peninsula. For the Aleutians, Fox Islands north to northeast at 20, and then south to southeast 15 to 20 for the Adak-Atka area, and coming up to gales here west of probably around Amchitka Island on out, with 40 knotters in the forecast Saturday for that far western zone. And then for Sunday, front moves through, definitely weakens, and west 20, northwest 25, Adak and Atka still with the front just to the west of you, kind of stalling out there, 25-knot winds, small craft advisories, and that's about it, with much lighter winds on off to the east. And for the southwest coast, south of Nunivak Island, northeast at 15 4-foot seas, southeast 15 for the Pribilofs, and then 40-knot winds coming into the picture tomorrow afternoon. They'll be mostly near and west of St. Matthew Island, and then in toward the coast, lighter, but St. Lawrence Island also picking up to 25 knots. And for the Sunday outlook, northwest 10, pretty light there for the Pribilofs. Small craft advisories there for St. Matthew Island at 30 knots. East, 25 knots here, blowing out of Kuskokwim Bay, turn southeast to about 20, back up to 30 knots with 13-foot seas for St. Lawrence Island. Along the Arctic coast, again, that coastal flood warning ending this evening early, and the advisory lingering a little bit longer. Easterlies there tomorrow, 25 to 30 knots. Lighter here on the west side, 25 from Wales all the way up to Cape Thompson. And then for Sunday, southwesterlies at about 20 knots here for the central and east side, a little more westerly over toward Demarcation Point. Those seas still up to 8 feet, though, still looking at 10-foot seas on the central coast. Pretty windy south to southwest, 30 knots here with 13-foot seas, about 10 to 11 feet here for the Chukchi Sea, and then the west coast there, west side, southwest 30 with seas at 11 feet. And for tonight, we've got high pressure building into the southwest interior, continued clearing and cooler conditions even into south central Alaska. That trough really dissipates out. Lingering showers here over the panhandle. This front, narrow band of light snow with it, and snow and wind on the decrease for the Arctic coast. And then a lot of warm air sliding northeastward here over the western Bering. Now bring some moisture in even tonight along the Yukon Delta coast, the Seward Peninsula. Next front out there pushing eastward slowly as the high recedes back to the east as well, which means clearer and drier conditions here, southwest Alaska and areas south of the Alaska Range. Warm front, warmer conditions. Rain or snow back to rain, and next storm affects Kodiak Island.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.